And welcome back to the Standard Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jono, and as always, my co-host, Chris, is joining me today.
We're back, and we promise we fix the audio issues.
Yes, audio issue
was my language.
It was on my part last time. I apologize.
Not my fault. We upgraded. We did everything on my end, but can't
what
fix
are you
stupid,
gonna do? Yeah, late breaking news. Chris's audio is working.
It's working, guys.
Well, speaking of late breaking news, today's little clip today, we are talking about a NFL player who has been cut by his former team or set to be cut and released by his former team. That's the second one in 1 month. So let's dive into it. So Dalvin Cook set to be released by the Minnesota Vikings, per source. Thoughts? I'm speechless to begin. I don't understand how this is possible, but I knew it was coming.
I mean, we everyone saw it coming for a couple weeks now, and there's a couple of issues around this, and there's been a lot of speculation onto where he's going to land. But I don't get the move. If they had, I get Mattison is a good and solid backup, but they're a playoff team, a contender that's ready to make a push, and they just cut one of their most valuable assets. Like, unless they are planning on just becoming a pass-heavy team and stop the running. But you saw last year how productive Dalvin Cook was, at least from a fantasy perspective. He was the 9th best fantasy running back. He stayed healthy. He had the shoulder issue last year, but he played every game. Yeah. And I just don't understand why you get rid of a valuable piece like that when you have a guy like Alexander Mattison, who is a solid player, but he's not Dalvin Cook.
Yeah. He's not Dalvin Cook, and we'll get into Alexander Mattison a little bit and to hinge this conversation back towards Cook a little bit. I, in my opinion, agree with you. I don't know why you just cut the guy. I get, okay, he carries a little bit more value in terms of contract, and maybe you want to unload that because you've got some young talent in receivers that you want to start paying. But the front office obviously has not committed past Kirk Cousins after this season. All right. Hasn't committed to that. He's now showing that he's not committed to his other valuable offensive weapon. He was not committed to Adam Thielen, their other valuable offensive weapon. So it's these veterans seem to be on the way out and new regime in Minnesota. And we obviously know you're going to have to pay Justin Jefferson to be the highest paid wide receiver out there. However, It can still be done to drop Dalvin Cook this season right now and to shoulder the running load on Alexander Mattison in a win now opportunity for Minnesota makes zero sense to me in a division where the Lions are now being competitive. They're not going to run away with this division. It to me, it hurts them a little bit more. Maybe it helps their pockets, but it hurts them on the field. Anybody else in the NFL can benefit off of Dalvin Cook right now. There's multiple teams, and we'll talk about them, but I still don't get why you just cut a guy and get nothing for him. Not even a bag lunch.
Yeah, I think that they were trying to trade him, and if they knew the issue could have been that no one wanted to take on his contract, and they weren't going to get any value for him. And that's, again, we'll get into that onto teams where he could possibly land, because I think the money is going to play into it. And I just don't. If they would have drafted a rookie this year or had a guy last year that was coming up, fine. I get it. Move on, go to the younger player. But Dalvin's 27, turning 28 this year. Mm-hmm. Madison's not too far behind him.
He's 25.
Madison's been in the league for a little bit.
Yeah.
And to just move on to essentially a backup running back and give him the full shoulder, the full brunt of the workload, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, give it over to Dalvin Cook light is the way I would put it.
Very light. This is Michelob Ultra.
Yeah, the Mick Ultra.
Sponsor us.
But seriously, at the end of the day, to get no value, like I understand they were trying to trade him. They were trying to do something big, and everybody looks at the value that San Francisco gave up for Christian McCaffrey, and with running backs, we're not seeing the same sort of value going across the board. I'm sitting here thinking to myself, even if you got a 5th round pick, a 4th round pick for Dalvin Cook, at the end of the day, that's another pick to help your future. You did nothing to help your future and definitely not your immediate future. That's just my opinion.
Even with D Hop and then the trade talks that they had with possibly between teams with Dalvin, makes me wonder on who actually gave value, and maybe where Minnesota didn't want to ship Dalvin to, or maybe Arizona didn't want to ship D Hop to certain teams for a 5th or a 6th round pick, and it was more of just, no, I'm going to cut you and you're going to have to sign with them instead of us trading him to a division rival or whatever the case.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're talking about the guy who holds the 3rd most rushing yards in franchise history too. It's not like we're talking about some slouch. He did it in 6 seasons with the Vikings.
And in 4 of those seasons, he was a Pro Bowler.
Yeah. I mean, like here, let's talk about places that we think we could see him go, or where teams possibly could really benefit by going into the Dalvin Cook race.
Do you want to talk about the need, or do you want to talk about ideal landing spots?
I mean, it could be both. I mean, like, to me, the Miami Dolphins are a team that name's been thrown around like crazy. I don't think that's a need offensive wise. Like, I feel like they're running. I think their backfield can handle what they need to do in that fast offense. However, they're a team that's out there that would be ideal for him too, because he automatically comes in as the starting role. He doesn't have to take on the 200-something carries. It's not a huge, to me, it's not a good fantasy move for us as fantasy players. I think that's the worst
fantasy spot for him.
No, I think there's worse off ones. But
I say that not to say he's not going to be successful there, but I say that because they have A-Chain, they have Wilson, they have Mozart, and those guys aren't going to go anywhere.
Correct.
And so
correct.
they're going to use those guys, and so it decreases on Dalvin's workload. Whereas if he went to a team like Tampa, or if he went to a team like Dallas, he's taking a much more run-heavy approach into those offenses, and he's going to shoulder the workload. Like, I think teams like Denver can make a real play for him. I think we've talked about the Javonte Williams injury at length. It's going to take a longer. It's going to be a longer recovery. So they essentially just have Samaje Perine. I think we could take a couple teams out of it. That's for sure. I think Seattle is not going to make a play for him.
Doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense. I don't think Vegas makes sense. I actually don't think Buffalo makes sense. Everyone's been throwing Buffalo around, but playing with James Cook is you have 4 guys in that backfield. They have Naheem Hines, they have his brother James Cook, have Latavius Murray, and they have Damian Harris. And it's the same thing as Miami. Like, they have capable guys and a loaded backfield there with a lot of talent. It doesn't make sense for them to
people are going to start talking about.
It goes back to what we were talking about with. He's going to probably want money, and that's probably where they came up with the contract dispute. So it's not going to be a short-term rental.
Well, he was due $14 million. He was due $14 million this year.
And he's 28. So he's going to want a longer-term deal. He's not going to want a one-year deal.
Yeah.
So teams like Kansas City, I don't see him going there either.
Well, in my opinion, I'll talk about this in a second after I talk about a couple teams that I think would be ideal or where he could be good to go. But the way the NFL is going, I kind of think the Vikings made the move they made to mimic the Buffalo Bills, to mimic the Kansas City Chiefs and these teams here. And I'll explain that in a second. But to me, ideally, like you said, Dallas already, I think it would be a great team for him to go to. I think they'll lean on Tony Pollard again in that 3rd down pass catching role a little bit more, and they'll feel a lot more safe having Dalvin Cook, their lead guy. He's definitely quicker, faster than Zeke is. And I honestly think the best move that would be made would be Baltimore Ravens. Ravens. And this is why I think so. J.K. Dobbins, yes, he's been successful there. And Gus Edwards has been a hard runner there. But Dalvin Cook would be the first big running back that would jump into that team. And, I mean, I guess you could say stats-wise, since Ray Rice was there. I mean, you got to talk about a guy who's going to be able to get the ball. He's going to be a 3-down back if he needs to be, but he won't because you've got other pieces there.
A guy that's going to beat the competition.
But literally, you get Dalvin in that situation, and now all your main positions are covered. You got your new receivers there. You're not going to go for D-Hop because you just signed Odell Beckham, so you're not going to be able to pay D-Hop in that position. You've got a tight end. You've got your quarterback already, and now you get yourself your running back, and now you put yourself in the AFC in a team to fight against Buffalo because you're a multifaceted monster. Like, you can do it in the run game and the pass game.
I don't really like Baltimore as a landing spot for him. I just don't think it fits offensively for him. I think that J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, we've seen guys that aren't as talented as Dalvin Cook be really successful there. And so you're
Really
adding
successful
money.
or just successful? Just
It's a
successful.
position. It's same thing as Buffalo. It's a position that they don't really need to have a premier guy there because of the way they run their offense. So whereas with the run game of the Vikings, they relied heavily on a big playmaking running back there because it wasn't like Kirk Cousins was a threat. They weren't running the read option there, so they needed to have a pure runner. You know, do I think he's going to be successful there? Do I think he's an upgrade over J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards? Absolutely. I just don't think that
Yes.
they want to tie up $10+ million at the running back position when they have a bunch of other needs, especially with them trying to rebuild that defense.
But here's the thing:
Have,
when you talk about Minnesota and Baltimore, you're talking about Minnesota was a team that did run. They don't run an RPO or anything like that because you got Kirk at the helm. However, let's not forget Minnesota was the number 3 offense with passing attempts last season,
yeah,
like over rushing attempts, and they had Dalvin Cook. So
yeah.
again, you don't need to have a heavy running back rush offense to have and still have a successful running back at the helm there. And I think Baltimore has been missing that. And honestly, in my opinion, I would like to hope that Gus and JK are healthy, but you're going to hope that they're healthy and those two guys are there and then have to sign veterans again and limp your way through the season. And I think that's what ended up getting Lamar Jackson, injured too, is because he had to shoulder more load than they wanted him to because he didn't have receivers to throw to and he didn't have healthy running backs to run the ball. So
Maybe.
I don't know. I just think it would be a great position for Baltimore. I don't know how much it helps in fantasy. I think he'd be a one running back one there, but does he put himself up into that top 10 situation? Maybe not because attempts are going to go down, but he keeps himself in a top 13, 14 consideration for RB1s.
Yeah, we did a little clip on this last week where we talked about wherever Dalvin goes, he's going to be the 1A. He's going to come in he's not going to go to a team with a workhorse with a bell cow running back. The only team that I've heard in discussion that has one of those guys are the New York Jets, and where they have Breece Hall there, and apparently they're going to be players in the Dalvin Cook sweepstakes. Now I don't know if that's just to keep him off of Miami and Buffalo, but I think that would be an interesting place for him. I think it hurts both him and Breece Hall. I think it helps that offense, but it hurts both of their value fantasy-wise. My two kind of sleeper picks that I would love to see him go are Jacksonville and Detroit.
I think Jacksonville's a good place.
I think he fits into both those offenses really well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's kind of what they want to do with limiting the touches on ETN in Jacksonville. Maybe not having David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs shoulder the load in.
Well, it pretty much fades Montgomery out of the picture.
It does. And that you would see Jahmyr Gibbs be playing more in the slot and 2 running back set, get third down work. But Dalvin Cook instantly becomes a star there.
Yeah. And I said that, I was talking with Nick earlier on the phone, and those are the two. He said Jaguars, I said Lions myself. But sitting and thinking about the Lions more, I'm not saying he wouldn't go to a division rival that he was before because he's on his own team. It's not a trade situation. But I think he could see that the rookie there they like a lot. And the Lions, in my opinion, like the backfield they have. I think you'll see Jahmyr Gibbs by the end of the season being more of the 2-to-1 ratio in rushing to Montgomery, but it's probably going to start the inverse. And I think Jacksonville will be a great situation for him. It takes all the pressure off of ETN. And
he wants to go to Florida.
Yep. He keeps him in Florida where he wants to be. He was a Miami guy. So, I don't know. I think Miami is...
He's from Miami. He was not a Miami guy.
Well, he's from Miami. He's an FSU guy. But Florida is in his blood. But I don't know. That being said, we should see. I feel like this is a situation that's going to move quicker than the DeAndre Hopkins situation. Because Hopkins can sit on it because he can wait out the suitors. I think there's going to be people chomping at the bit for Dalvin, and they're going to be putting up offers fast to him.
I also do think that that's going to play into like a lot of these teams that we talked about like Buffalo, Kansas City, the Jets. They're those teams would benefit more by having DeAndre Hopkins on their team than they would by having Dalvin Cook on their team.
Yeah.
So I think that in terms of like the grand scheme of players, like they'd probably want to spend the money to go get D-Hop than they would to go get Dalvin Cook, because all those guys, all those teams that we just mentioned are pretty set at running back. Like even Kansas City, I don't think that's a great landing spot for him. I think
Not how that offense works.
exactly. It's not how the offense works. But D-Hop would be perfect, better there. And if you're going to spend $10 to $14 million somewhere, it's not going to be at the running back position. It's going to be at the wide receiver position.
Well, let's just put it this way: if you look at the top 5 offenses that, in terms of rushing, and I'll stretch out the top 7 because it includes 2 of the teams I said. You got Falcons, Bears, Eagles, Commanders, Browns, Cowboys, Ravens, and then number 8 would be the Giants. I mean, Cowboys, Ravens, I mentioned. But the Bears may not be shy about this. But again, does he want to go to the Bears or does he want to go to a team that's in contention? I mean, he goes to the Cowboys, that makes them a better team off the bat. He goes to the Ravens, that's a winning, team that could win, that puts them in a winning opportunity off the bat. You go to the Bears in what you would probably consider a rebuild. I don't know if he's interested, and he's in the place where he gets to make the deal.
Well, again, if the whole issue in Minnesota was a contract dispute, he might be looking for a 3 or 4 year deal. He might not be looking for that 1 year deal. And Chicago might be able to give him a 3-year deal to put him at 31 years old.
Well, don't forget, Dallas can do that too because they just franchise tag Tony Pollard. They don't have to re-sign Tony Pollard. They can put their future in Dalvin.
Right. And so
that's why I like that. That's why I think that's a good spot. And same thing with the Ravens. It's like they don't have to buy into Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. They don't have long-term deals with those guys.
No.
But they just signed a long-term deal with their quarterback. And why not put yourself in another there? But this is the one thing I think Minnesota, and I want to talk about this before we, spend a couple minutes on Mattison and where we think he should be going in drafts, is the way the NFL is moving, and I think Minnesota's trying to play a copycat game maybe a little bit here, is the fact that you look at Buffalo and you look at Kansas City, and the amount of money they have in their running back room is nothing compared to their quarterback, their tight end, their offensive line, their wide receivers. Like, that's where they're spending their money. And again, it shows these guys are at the top of the game. If you can put your money into protecting your quarterback and having an elite guy at the quarterback helm, it helps. And I think you may start seeing some other and defense. And you may start seeing that happen amongst other leagues. And I think the problem is the running backs are going to get screwed here in this market. And it shows with Dalvin Cook here. And it's going to show with Saquon Barkley. As a Giants fan, I'm nervous because Saquon still hasn't signed the franchise tag. He was offered $13 million, didn't accept it. Then that deal was pulled. He's not going to get a $13 million a year deal again from the Giants. I guarantee it. I think it's going to be around the $10 million, maybe 11 at most. And then you look at that. Is he rather just going to sign the franchise tag, get his average there, and then go seek out a contract somewhere else where I don't think he's going to get the money? I think the running back contracts are going to decrease as these quarterback contracts keep going up and wide receiver contracts keep going up.
Well, I don't necessarily agree. I don't think that you're going to – I think that the elite running backs are going to get paid. And everyone else, they're going to replace you.
But we're talking about elite running backs. This is my opinion with the elite running backs. Everybody's on this 5-year rookie contract or 5th-year option. If it was a 3-year, like a 2-year rookie contract or 3-year rookie contract with a 4th-year option, I could see that being more incentive to sign a running back. But there's less incentive to sign that running back.
We've talked about this off camera. Like I've said that I think the NFLPA needs to renegotiate for rookie contracts for running backs. Yeah. Where you're gonna be a workhorse for the first 3 years. That's where you're gonna be most productive. That those guys shouldn't be on rookie deals for 5 years, and teams shouldn't be allowed to franchise tag you and hold you hostage essentially until they've worn you down. The running backs get like their length of elite talent is much shorter than other players.
Definitely short window.
And the NFLPA, I think, should step in and say, hey, no, you know what? They're going to be on rookie contracts, but the running back is going to be more equivalent to a quarterback. if you're going to take a first or second round running back here, you're going to pay him comparable to a quarterback.
Correct.
For these rookie players to where they're going to get paid, because it's ridiculous seeing these rookies touch the ball. Najee Harris is probably going to be out of the league by the time he's 29 years old, and he's going to be seeing 400 touches a season.
He won't finish with the Steelers either. That's what I'm saying. It's like, look at Saquon's a perfect example. Everybody's like, oh, he has injuries. But like, literally, in my opinion, his injury was an ACL injury. Many running backs have had that and been fine. And he showed it last year. He came back. He's fine. But at the end of the day, his 5th year, they franchise tag him. His 5th year is up. Like, he's franchise tag now. You could do it for 3 years, but he doesn't have to sign it. He could pull Le'Veon Bell. And I don't think obviously it's a business, but I don't think it's fair to the running back situation, and it screws him over. But I digress. Let's move on to Alexander Mattison. And I think people are going to jump on this Mattison train, and I'm going to be the first one to pump the brakes and take the train afterwards and not necessarily ride that one, because I don't think he's worth the hype. And I think he's good. I just don't think he's going to be a guy that should be picked in the first 3 rounds of your fantasy drafts.
He's not going to be a top 15 running back.
He shouldn't be drafted as one either.
He's going to be an RB2. And he's going to fit right in that character, that category, just based on the offense that he plays on and the workload that he's going to get.
Yeah.
I think that we've seen last year his numbers decrease for when he did have the touches. He wasn't as explosive. I mean, everyone is going to point out the games that he started over Dalvin Cook and all of this PPR points and how he was performing, and he had 100-yard gains, but what made Dalvin special is the fact that he can break off an 80-yard run like that.
Yeah.
And Mattison is just not that. Mattison is going to break off runs. He's going to get volume. He's going to be able to get into the end zone, but he's not going to be breaking off long touchdown runs. He's going to be a volume guy where he's going to have 20, 25 carries and end the game with 90 to 110 yards. And so he
needs the 20 carries to get that done. That's the thing.
Exactly.
Like, you look at there were 5 games in the past 3 years where he had 20 or more carries, and he had 100 yards, 90 or more yards each one of those games. They happen to all be against the Lions and the Seahawks, which is pretty funny. But that just goes to show you every other game. There's a reason why he has a 3.8 average in 2022. It's just when he gets short yardage and he gets these small amount of carries, you don't get a head of steamroll. It's like putting a batter in on a pinch hit. It's like you might get a home run, or most likely you're going to get a ground out or a strikeout because the guy's just cold. He's not great off the bench. So I do think giving him the volume is going to help him. But again, you're talking about a team that was in the bottom 5 in the NFL in rushing attempts last year. It doesn't equate to similar to the Chargers, who tied with them in rushing attempts with Eckler.
I did say a couple of weeks ago I did a short on keeping my eye on this situation exactly, and how Mattison is a guy that he should climb up the ADP boards. He should. Like, he's in a good offense.
Yes,
he is going to get volume. He's going to get red zone carries. He's going to get touchdowns. His workload is going to increase from what we've seen. You're going to replace a lot of those Dalvin Cook carries with Alexander Mattison carries. So it's a guy that you have to like, but where are you going to take him? Are you going to take him inside the top 3 rounds? Probably not. I think that there's other players there but I can see back end of 3rd round, depending on what your strategy is. And, he's a perfect candidate for a 0 running back strategy. Let
me throw out a couple names that ADP wise, I could see him being around and who you'd rather take in those situations. So, Miles Sanders.
I probably would take Mattison. I would lean towards him. It's pretty close, but I would take Mattison over him right now. Just based on the offense that he's in.
Okay. ETN.
Again, ETN I would take over him. As of right now, the way the backfield is.
Okay. Najee.
I would take Najee over him.
Okay. Let me throw out a couple more names here. James Conner.
I would take Conner over him.
And how about Rachaad White? That's a tricky one, but Rachaad White.
See, that I knew you were going to bring that up. I'd probably take Mattison over Rachaad White.
Yeah, I just based on the offense, just based on goal line opportunity, I agree. I would do the same thing. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough when you're sitting there and you're looking at this.
Just
All
to
those
clarify,
names in front of you.
I would take Connor over Madison.
Yeah, I would too.
I would take Najee over Madison.
Yeah. So I like the opportunities for Madison. Are you going to buy into the hype that he's going to replace the numbers of Cook? I don't think you can. You brought up the best point is like he's not a home run hitter. I mean, Cook proved it last year multiple times. He caught that screen pass for 75 yards to win the game for them. I mean, there's things he can do on the field that Madison just can't. Yeah, Madison just can't do it. So, any closing statements on this big move? Any thoughts before we head out?
I think we knew this was going to happen. It finally happened. So we get this conversation out of the way, and now we wait on where he's going to sign. Please, if you're not going to go to the Jets, stay out of the AFC East. Please
and
stay out of the AFC
I would say just don't go to the Cowboys, please. Thank you. Well, keep an eye out keep your ear to the ground for the news on Dalvin Cook as soon as it breaks.
I want to say this now. Watch he goes to the Patriots.
Yeah, well, that would suck.
No one's talking about it. I love Ramondre Stevenson. I got shares in Ramondre Stevenson. Watch he goes there.
Well, when we find out where he goes, be sure to check in with our channel. We'll be diving into the fantasy impact of where he lands. Same thing with DeAndre Hopkins when that happens as well. Thanks for tuning in today. Don't forget to like and subscribe and click that notification button so you can be up to date with all our new episodes. Thanks, guys.